tape player is right here, and we'll just take the cord here. Looks like everything's rolling. Just don't want the pause. As long as it doesn't say pause there, then it's fine. I'm just going to sit here.
You can come in here if you wish. And lots of chairs there.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Jen.
Okay, we'll start by, what is your full name?
James Daniel Graham.
Okay. And who were your parents?
Alton Graham and Nellie. My mother's name was Nellie.
Okay, and her maiden name was?
Como.
And when were you born?
1920, March 7th of 1920.
Okay, and where were you born?
In Lake Midway.
Okay. How large was the family that you grew up in?
10. There was 10 of us living.
And where do you fit in the family?
Third
So
from the top.
Okay, how did you feel about being the third from the top?
Oh, it was nice to have a large family. We all grew up together, and of course some of them were married by the time the last ones came along.
Okay. What did your father do for a living?
He farmed some and fished.
Okay. And what did your mother do?
She, of course, had a full-time job at home.
Okay. What was a typical school day like for you?
Well, we walked about 1.25 miles to school, and most of the time there was probably, excuse me, 10 to 13 children went, and that was in the foot of the lake, in Lake Midway.
Okay.
And the school is no longer there, but there's a home just about the same area that belongs to Jimmy Gidney.
So what was it like walking to school that
Oh,
far?
many days it was very cold, and you'd have to turn around and walk backwards into the storm, and the same way going home at times.
Okay.
It was cold, and cold in the school too.
I can imagine. Who was your best friend at school?
Oh, well, gee, I don't know. I can't recall anyone special, but used to have a few fights. The boys used to squabble a little bit, different families.
What would happen when there was a fight?
Oh, somebody would go home with a nosebleed or something.
What types of things do you remember doing with your friends?
Oh, we used to skate on the lake and swim in the summertime.
Which lake would you skate on?
In Lake Midway, that's where we were born and brought up, right to the head of the lake.
Okay. And what is your best memory of school?
Gee, I never liked school very much.
Why was that?
So, I don't know why, but I was happy when the day I thought I was happy, I guess, the day that I became 14, I walked home with my books.
Okay.
And you had to go to school when you was 14.
Okay. What subjects were you taught in school?
Well, of course, reading and writing and arithmetic, and I got up into the algebra in grade 9, and I couldn't understand it, and the teacher that we had couldn't seem to make me understand it, and probably her fault or maybe mine, I don't know, but after I was a little older, I started a course in internal combustion engines, and of course I had to start right back in like grade 1 and worked up through it, and it was so simple that it wasn't funny, so it was probably my fault.
What was your favorite subject in school?
Probably geography.
And why was that?
Well, I don't know. I'd like to travel, but I never got the opportunity to travel very much.
And what was your least favorite subject?
Well, probably reading.
Reading?
But I like to read now.
How were you disciplined in school?
Well, I don't think that I got too many strappings, but that's the way they used to do it. They had a strap and get out of hand, or you'd go have to stand in the corner a little bit. Nobody liked to do that.
And how were you disciplined at home?
Probably with a big kindling stick.
Do you ever remember being disciplined at home?
No, I don't really. I don't remember getting any. Probably did, but I don't remember them.
What were your daily chores?
Well, we had to cut some kindlings to build fires with. We, of course, had to burn wood and carry in the wood. Of course, there was 2 or 3 of us that was growing up at the same time to do those things. And when you got to be 9 or 10 years old, you had to milk cows and feed the cattle. Summertime, you had to help with the hay and weed the gardens. And you didn't like that, but you had to do it in order to live.
After your chores were done, what would you like to do with your free time?
Well, we never had too much for recreation unless you made it yourself, and we used to build bobsleds out of some old apple barrel staves and a piece of plank, and there was a big hill up back of us. In wintertime, and those days we had lots of crust, the heavy crust would freeze when the sleep storm. And we'd ride down those, and if the jump wasn't big enough, we'd build it up, go over the jump, sometimes get hurt.
What was your favorite holiday when you were a child?
I think Christmas.
And why was that?
Well, big family and lots of goodies. And, of course, they were all homemade. Mom made good donuts, and she had them hid in the trunk at one time. I remember that. And we had he's a distant relative of mine, come home from the States, and he lived with us. And he was kind of a bad character, and he made a key through a soap. He got Bud, I think, my brother, he's older than I am, to make an imprint of the key, and he filed it out. And Mom had her donuts and fudge locked up in the trunk. I still have the trunk down here. And he made the key, and we used to go in and get 1 donut and 1 piece of fudge. Of course, it was made probably a month before Christmas time. By the time Christmas got there, Mom opened the trunk, had no donuts and no fudge left for Christmas.
And what did your mother say about that?
Oh, she was kind of upset. Yeah, really.
What other holidays or special events do you remember as a young child?
Well, not too much. Special event, I guess, was the last day of school.
What did you do on the last day of school?
Oh, money was very scarce in those days, and we used to have to wear. We always had lots to eat and was kept warm, but money wasn't very plentiful. And you'd have to wear gum rubbers to school, and rubber boots up to your ankle. And of course, it was a long ways to walk in your bare feet. So come the last day of school, you could shed your gum rubbers, and there was 1 or 2 years when you had no other shoes to put on, so you had to go in your bare feet.
And what was that like?
Well, at first it was very, very painful, but your feet got toughened up to it, walking on the gravel and in new mown hay. That would be sharp, and it would hurt. Or you'd step on a splinter, it would make you hobble. And we used to go pick berries, strawberries, wild strawberries and raspberries. Now and then run in a hornet's nest, and you would have to take off and get moving.
What was your favorite toy?
I guess it was a sled. That's when I found out that there wasn't really any Santa Claus. And I still can remember that very plain. Mom had it hid under a bed, and being nosy, I looked under the bed and discovered the sled a couple of days before Christmas. I was kind of saddened to think that my sled was there before Santa Claus arrived. But isn't it strange how you remember things like that, though? Yeah.
What pets do you remember having?
Pardon?
What pets do you remember having?
Oh, dogs. We always generally had a dog. Various ones we had over the years. And probably a few cats, but they were nothing special to me, cats. But lambs. We had sheep, of course. Had a little lamb one time, and he was born blind. Do you want to hear this little story?
Of course.
Anyhow, his mother he couldn't go with his mother much, and she didn't feed him, so we had to bring him up by bottle, little Dick lamb. And come the time my father was out working somewhere, he had trucks too at that time. He was doing something, and he used to butcher a few lambs, his own, and sell them around different places. So he left word this day for us to butcher the little blind lamb. So it was up to me to look after him, and I got him down and had his neck across my knee ready to do the job. And I couldn't do it. I had to let him up. And I don't know whatever happened to him, but I guess he probably got butchered sometime in a later date.
Did they find out that you hadn't?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Did you
Yeah.
get in trouble?
No, I didn't get in any trouble, but I couldn't do it.
What was it like at your house when the catalog arrived?
Well, probably a mad race. That time it was the Eaton's catalog. Yeah. Everybody had to look at the catalog.
What sort of things were in the catalog back then that would be different from today?
Oh, not that much, but they did. See, Eaton sold about everything and offered about everything in that. Bicycles, which I never owned one of my own. There was always pictures of bicycles and wheelbarrows and most everything in that catalog. No, my brother Bud owned a bicycle, and I used to use that.
Where else would you get the things that you needed?
In Digby, mostly.
And where would you go to in Digby?
Oh, I don't know the names of the stores. Oh, darn. I can't remember their names right now, but I probably will before too long.
Okay. How much spending money did you have as a young child?
We were fortunate if we got 5 cents a week.
And if you did get the 5 cents, what would you do with it?
Well, probably candy till you got big enough, and then you used to kind of sneak 5 cents worth of cigarettes, you know. Most young boys done that. But thankfully, I don't do it now. Don't smoke. And I never smoked for too many years. Actually, probably too many, but not a whole lot of years. So I remember at one time this is how nicotine can get to you, I guess. I smoked or quit for 17 years, but I always wanted to smoke during that time. So I started and I smoked a year, quit another year, and I think I smoked another year after that, and I quit them, and I never wanted one after that for some reason. Thank the good Lord that I got clear of that. But they're hard. I would advise anyone to stay away from them.
What was your religion?
Oh, Baptist. And when we were young, though, we used to go to the United Church in Centerville. We had to walk to Centerville. It was walk everywhere then. Yeah.
What were Sundays like in your household when you were growing up?
Sundays? Well, most of the time we would go to Sunday school when we were smaller, and then Sundays would become a gathering day. My father used to cut hair for a few people, and they would all, there's been high as 22 or 23 at home for Sunday dinner. they'd come, he'd cut three or four men would come, he'd cut their hair. Of course, they'd stay and all have dinner. So they got a free haircut and a free dinner.
And what did you think about that?
Oh, it was great, I suppose, to have lots of people around. Yeah, yeah.
What influence did religion have throughout your life?
Well, I've never been, I guess, a very staunch churchgoer. I've always believed there is a God, which I know there is, but I just don't go to church. I did when I was young, used to go to church and enjoyed, an old Reverend Mr. Dimmick. He lived next door to us in Lake Midway. I enjoyed going to church to him, and after you grow up, it seems so you get away from these things. And a lot of people shouldn't, but we do.
How do you keep up, or how did you keep up, with what was going on in the outside world?
How did I keep up with it? I don't know. I just took things in stride, and I worked, I guess, about every day in my life that I can, since I've been big enough to go to work. Up until 15 years ago, I retired, and I've worked harder than ever.
How would you receive your news?
My what?
How would you receive the news?
The news of such as...
Any events, the wars?
Oh, well, yeah, I suppose I would take everything in stride, which I always have. Whatever happens, you take it in your stride, or if you don't, you seem to get in trouble. If you take things, you can take it serious, but you know it's out there and it's going to happen. My war years I spent in St. John. My father and I operated a boat over there for the St. John Iron Works, doing repair work on ships, and so that's where I spent about, from 42 to 50.
What was that like?
We worked very many hours doing that type of work, like repair work on ships. The ships would come in from across the ocean. Sometimes I seen one Sunday they come in. There was Christmas Day too on Sunday. There was a ship come in. There was a storm in the Bay of Fundy. They done well till I got in the Bay of Fundy, and the spar on the boom on the mast got loose, and they couldn't go near it. Of course, it was swinging back and forth on the ship. It was just a clean, and that would probably weigh 3 or 4 tons. The mast on the ship would. That was swinging back and forth and would clean everything that it hit, just swiping it. I remember that Sunday, there was a crowd come in, the workmen, and welding and burning and rebuilding, getting the ship ready to go to sea again.
What was the name of the ship?
Oh boy, I can't remember that one. We worked on so many of them that I remember one in particular. I think it was the Empire Story, that went out of St. John just before dark. This was probably in 45. Had a load of tanks and all war equipment, going overseas. And we untied away from him about 5:30 or so. And he started out of the Bay of Fundy. The last thing they done, they welded cleats on the deck to secure tanks on her. And they got those done the way he went. He didn't go very far. He went down here off of Briar Island and hit on the ledge and drifted back up in just below here, I think, off of Whale Cove somewhere, and it sank there. Whole load of it. Yeah. Yeah.
How did the war affect your family?
Well, we're fortunate enough not to have lost anyone in the family in the war, but my brother Bud, or Henry, he's 2 years older than I am. he was in the Air Force, and he didn't go overseas, but he was a trainer, and he spent, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, I guess, at that. And another younger brother was in the service, and Haley. He wasn't overseas either. He was about 4 years younger than myself, and he didn't get in until it was pretty near over. Yeah.
How did the war affect your community?
Well, I was away all the time doing that, and there wasn't too much of a community anyhow. Only about, you probably know where you can buy Lake Midway. So there's only 4 or 5 houses along there anyhow. So actually it wouldn't affect it a whole lot.
What do you remember about your teenage years?
Well, when we got old enough, and there used to be the odd show in Centerville, silent movies. You used to pay, I don't know, 15 or cents or so to go to one of those. And then they started having dances around different places, and used to go to a few dances. So that was your pastime, I guess. And walking, and when you wasn't walking, you was running. To go to Centerville from our home where the nearest store was about 1.5 miles down into Centerville. And you used to have to go up there all the time and do our grocery shopping. And that, of course, was a gathering place for men at those days. It'd be benches around the store where they would all sit around and see who could probably tell the biggest lie. And then they used to get in some awful arguments over religion. There was a few of them, you know. They would get in some terrible arguments.
How often would you leave your town?
Not very often, because maybe on a Saturday night once in a while we would, the mail bus, after you got a little older, would be going to Digby, and you'd go up onto that and go to maybe, if you got older, go to a movie. But I was fortunate enough to, when I was 16, I guess I got my first car, and so I didn't have to travel too much on the mail bus.
What were the roads like?
Gravel and rough. Sometimes in the spring they were impassable. The frost would go to the ground, and you'd have to get towed out now and then with a pair of oxen or horses. Something. There was one fellow that he drank a bit, and he got stuck up by the cemetery in Lake Midway. There's a cemetery just above where we live. When he looked up, he seen where he was. He was pretty frightened of cemeteries. So he got out of his car and left it in gear, left the motor going, left it in gear, and he walked down home, which would be about 1/4 mile, to where got my father to yoke up his oxen and go tow him out. First, when they got back, the engine was going, the wheels still going around.
Describe to me how you felt when you got your first car.
Well, I think I was quite happy. It was an old 28 Whippet, a little 4-cylinder engine in it, and we used to come down, a fellow by the name of Bobby Raymond, he's deceased now. We used to come down here to Mink Cove and Little River and see the girls. One night we started home, and ran out of gas, and had to leave the old thing on the side of the road, and got walking up by the lake, and there was a hoot owl, and he was hollering, hoo hoo, you know how they go. And Bobby said, I can remember hearing him say that, yeah, that's only Only Jim and Bobby were walking home. Another night we went down the old church hill in Sandy Cove. That was pretty steep, and it was one of those sleet storms. We started going down there, and I don't know how many times we went around and around. Wound up in the ditch, the doors flew open. Luckily, we both stayed in it, and come back out on the road and just drove away. We didn't get hurt or anything, but we made a few circles.
Who would maintain the roads?
Each section had what they call a roadman or something like that, and there would be a grader come now and then and grade it, but the gravel was hauled from local pits, Rotten Rock it was called, and that was delivered on the road either by a horse or oxen, and used to have to load that by hand, pick it out with a pick and shovel it on. And I remember working at that when I was 15, 16 years old, 14 maybe. You'd have to help pick it out and load it and unload it. And follow behind you, come with a rake, and he'd rake it off level, and that's the way the holes were patched. And, yeah.
What did you think about that job?
Oh, it was a lot of hard work, but I did learn how to shovel. I can still shovel today a lot better than a lot of young fellows because they don't know how. You use your leg for and it really makes a difference. You kind of squat down, put the shovel across your knee, and give it a push, and you can shovel. I could probably out-shovel a lot of fellers yet.
And how dangerous would that job be?
Oh, not very dangerous, no. It was all, excuse me, most of the gravel were hauled like off of the North Mountain on the hill, and so you had no brakes then but you had what they called a drag shoe, and of course there was a chain fastened to the body of a runner, and one of the wheels would go up on it, up on the shoe, and that wheel wouldn't turn, and that shoe would be dragging along the ground. That would help hold it back. That would help the horses or oxen. Yeah, it was a drag shoe, is what it was. That had an iron shoe on the bottom of it. And, yeah, then you get to the bottom, you'd have to back up a foot or two, take the shoe out from under it, and hang it up on your wagon again. And go, as long as you're on the level or going uphill, you didn't have to use that.
As a team, what kinds of things would you do for fun?
Well, it's mostly swimming and skating, and after I got big enough and got over being bashful, I used to go to dances. Got courage to ask a girl to dance with me. So,
what would those dances be like?
oh, they were a lot of fun. It was all, of course, local music. There was no records or nothing was recorded those days for us. Someone played a guitar and a violin and maybe a mouth organ, and there was an old fellow by the name of Mr. Cunningham. I think he was from up around Clementsport or somewhere. He used to play a guitar and a mouth organ and beat the drum with his foot. He was a one-man band.
What kind of decorations would they have?
Oh, very little in those days, except for maybe Christmas time, or something. But yeah.
Who were some of your screen idols?
Oh boy, been so long I even forget her name now. But I remember there was one girl I used to keep her picture pinned up in my old car, and of course Mabel was my girlfriend then. We went together for many years before we were married, and off and on. And she didn't appreciate that too much at times.
What was your favorite outfit to wear?
Oh, gee. I guess at that time, when I was a young fella, you had bell-bottom trousers and a true turtleneck sweater and bell-bottom trousers. Yeah.
Where did you get these clothes?
Oh, probably in Digby or T. Eaton's. Mostly T. Eaton's, and our denims then used to be bell-bottom too, I think, if I remember right. Yeah.
How much would you pay for these clothes?
Well, I don't know, probably $4 or $5 or $2 or $3 for a pair of denims then. Like about 50, 60 now, aren't they?
Yeah.
Expensive.
Yeah.
What sort of music did you like back then?
Oh, boy. Well, I like country and western some, and a little bit of semi-classical. I like the sound of that, and I used to have a few records of, I can't remember their name now. There's a couple of black women, I like to hear them sing. And I did have some records of theirs.
What do you remember about dating?
Dating? Now she's getting personal.
It had to come.
Oh, I don't know what to tell you. I guess it was fun. Had to be. Kept at it for probably 12, 15 years. I was married. We were married when I was 27. And I started going with Mabel off and on when I was about 16, I guess. But then there was various girls in between. Used to go to dances over in St. John a lot when we was over there. And used to be some good times over there.
What did you expect to do when you grew up?
Really, I don't know. It just, life, jobs, apparently just came to me, and I done them, whatever it might have been. I started out when I was 14. Like I said, I left school. I worked on the farm home some. And when I was 16, I remember going in the valley, Annapolis Valley, up to Greenwich with a crowd of boys. And I went to work in an apple warehouse. It's right there now. It's a tractor place. For 20 cents an hour. And when we first went there, we were working 10-hour days, of course, and went there, we was paying $6 a week board. But we had to walk home to get our dinner, which was at least 2 miles away. So that was 4 miles you had to walk. And eat your dinner and get back in an hour. You had to scurry. So we put up with that for a week or two. And we moved up to another place. Their name was Calkin, Jack Calkins. And we had to pay $10 a week board. So we were earning $12 and paid $10 a week board, and we had $2 whole left for a week's work. And it was work, too. Packing apples in barrels and facing, what you call facing, your head was down the barrel. You'd have to clip the stem off an apple and make them circles all the way around, round, round, round. That was the top of the barrel. So when you opened the barrel, they opened the barrel, they'd go to England, open the barrel, it was all faced input. And then finish filling the barrel with apples. And sometimes then you'd have to load boxcars when you wasn't working in the warehouse, and stacking them out in the warehouse, 3 high. That got to be hard work. 16. So I come home from there, and I think I went scallop fishing with my father. Done that for a couple of years, and then I went in 1940, right after the war started in 39. It was either 40 or 41. I went to Greenwood and driving truck on the airport when they were building the airport. Done that for a couple of seasons and years, and come back home and started scallop fishing again. And that's when they sold the boat that I was in. Father and I went to St. John. Worked over there 8 years and came back home in 1950. Built this house with some help, of course. And then I went to work with Mabel's sister's husband, Clyde Denton. And he, at that time, I went lobster fishing for a year off the wave poles in the Bay of Fundy. Then I went to work with Clyde. And he, at that time, had started to drying fish. Worked in the dryer there some, and then he got some trucks, and I drove truck. First started with a straight truck, and then a tandem, and then a trailer. And we hauled from here to Cape Breton, and Canso, and down to Pubnico. Worked 90 to 100 hours a week for 30 or 40 bucks, which wasn't very good. But anyhow, went from that. He started in the fresh fish business, and I went to work down there, and then I became the maintenance man, looked after the skinning machines and refrigeration, and so everything just seemed to fall in place. Anything, I guess everybody expected me to be able to do it, so I went to work and done it.
What was it like working with your father?
My father? Oh, it was okay. My father was good to work with, and we were together a lot. And he was a man that could do many things, and he would show you, tell you. Only one time I do remember this, that he always said, "You can use my tools." He had carpenter tools. "You can use my tools, but put them back where you got them." So one day he started looking for a handsaw. So it came, "Jim, you have my handsaw?" I thought for a minute. "Oh yeah, I know where it is." So I went up in the haymow to get his handsaw, and at that time we put salt on the hay. You had to keep it from getting spontaneous combustion. If you put it in a little green, you always added some salt to it. The handsaw was up there, then laying on that salt. You can imagine what that looked like. So this is the only time my father ever touched me that I remember. I passed him the handsaw. He just looked at it. I started to walk away, and firstly, I got a boot right in the side, the side of the seat. I knew what he meant. Yeah. He never said anything. He just looked at it, he saw him, wham.
What about working on the farm?
That was hard work, and lots of rocks to pick, and there's no end to the rocks on Digby Neck. You can pick them up, and next year you plow it and you get another batch. I think the frost keeps them coming up. And I had a brother, Bud. We always get along fine. Had a few squabbles, but he liked to read better than he liked to work. Of course, my father would go away and say, "Boys, I want you to plow this piece of ground, or pick the rocks off of this piece, or plant something, or do something anyhow." He'd always tell you what to do, because he had to keep us going. But Bud, he liked to read. He'd get a hold of a true story or a Western magazine and curl up in the corner. I used to have to fight with him to get him to go out to work. Yeah. I was younger, but I had to take the lead to to get him to work.
And how did you feel about that?
Well, I got peeved at times, I guess. Yeah.
How old were you when you got married?
27.
And how did you meet your wife?
Oh, well, like I said, went with her for 16 years, or since she was about 16, off and on. I remember the first, I think that used to come down here. She'd go to church and come down, and we'd drive her home. We used to go to church maybe with them. And down to her home was right down here. So I think that's how I met her. Then she came up home. We went skating on the lake, and it just went on from there. Yeah.
And what was her full name?
Mabel Frances Kelly. Yeah.
What attracted you to her?
Oh, she had very beautiful hair. Long, brown, curly. And very plain. And a good girl. Very outspoken. You'd have to meet her and talk to her a while to know what she was like. Still is the same.
What do you remember about your wedding?
My wedding was very, very brief. Mabel was like that, like I say, very plain. She didn't want anything like that. She came over to St. John in 1947, in May the 3rd. And we were married at a church, parsonage, by Dr. Vincent, I think his name was. And one of her childhood friends and next door neighbors was living over there. So she and her husband stood up with us. And that was our wedding. It was very plain. We didn't do very much towards the wedding. That's what she wanted. And of course, I didn't have very many bucks then.
Where did you go for your honeymoon?
Over to PEI. She had a sister who lived over there, and we went over there for a few days.
And how was that?
Oh, a very quiet time. Very quiet, apparently. Come back, and she didn't like to live in St. John. Stayed over there a little while and come back home, and she wanted a little grocery store, so we built a store over on the corner over here. She operated that for a few years, and I was still working in St. John. And come back home after a year to a few years. She gave that up. We were married 7 years before we had any family. Had a boy, Marty, and a daughter, Pamela.
What did you know about the birds and the bees when you got married?
Probably everything there was, or at least I thought I knew everything there was, but I still don't know everything that a person really should know, I guess.
How would you learn that kind of stuff?
Well, most of it through older people telling you things, I suppose, and things that you would probably try out for yourself. Yeah.
Once you were married, where did you live?
I remained in St. John we were married 3 more years after we were married, and then I came home here to Little River, and we built this home, and we've been here ever since.
And how much did it cost for this home?
Oh, probably $6,000 or $8,000. somewhere around that. We've never changed the outside except to take the siding off and shingle it. The same shape, same size. At times we wished we had a bigger home. We had 2 children, like I say, and Mabel's sister has lived with us from the time we came here. She never been married, of course. She wasn't well. And when Mabel brought her things up from her home right down to this house right down here, that was leaving Alma with her parents, which were getting along in years. And she at that time, of course, was a young woman. And they liked to go to bed probably 9 o'clock, and she wasn't ready to do that. So Mabel says, well, you come live with us for a while. So she came there to live with us, and she's been with us ever since.
And what do you think about that?
Oh, at times you would wish you were alone. Other times she's good company. She tells us what to do. Probably pretty near when to go to bed and when to get up. No maid. You mustn't do this and you mustn't do that. You know, our children, she used to make them mind a lot more than their mother did. Mabel would let them do a lot of things, but Alma wouldn't. No, she was some strict.
When would people get together for a good time in the community?
Probably in those, when we were able to go out most of the time, but on Saturday night, our recreation was probably go to a dance here and there for a few years. And then we had friends that lived up in Waterford. We used to go up there in the summertime and have little get-togethers.
What would they be like?
Oh, they were very good friends, and there's only really one of them still alive. It was all fun. You'd have pitching horseshoes or throwing darts, you know, and there was a game with what's it called? Not ring toss. No, it was a round circle, plastic circle, and you had a metal dart with feathers on it, and like feathers or plastic, and you toss it. Used to like that.
What did you grow and raise yourself?
On the farm when we was growing up, all kinds of vegetables, potatoes, peas. We used to put probably about 20 barrels of potatoes in the basement, and had an apple orchard, picked the apples, and a few turnips. You'd grow turnips and mango beets to feed the cattle. The basement used to be right full when you got down in the fall. Just could get in there, along with some wood. And I remember a trap door. You used to have to lift up and go down in the basement to get the wood. And used to probably butcher their own. Had pig, and you'd fill your barrels. You had no freezers then, and you'd have your bacon smoked, and probably hang up a quarter of beef out in the building somewhere when the weather got real cold and it would freeze. You'd go saw off a roast or something when you wanted meat. Nobody had any fridges. We didn't, not in those days. Never had electricity until I was probably 13 or 14 years old. Probably the lights came down here, the power, when I was 11 or 12. I think it was a couple of years after they came down here that we had the power. It was all lamps, lanterns. If you wanted to go out to the barn, you lit a lantern and go to bed. Sometimes you'd take a lantern or a lamp. Yeah. Women in those days, they had a lot of work to do. Had to clean their lamps and fill them with oil, bake bread for dinner every day, do your washing by hand until got an old washing machine which wasn't electric. You push it back and forth. There was I think an old Renfrew or something it was called. Had a circle bottom and flat top on it, and ridges in the bottom. You shoved that back and forth. And then you got electric washer. You was right up in the world. Well, even before that, there was a hand wringer, you know. You used to, one of the kids would have to turn the handle for put the clothes through and wring them. Yeah, man, yes, there was a lot of work. Churn the butter. You'd have to churn. Yeah, that was good. The new buttermilk was nothing any better. I don't know if you ever drank it or not, but it was good. I used to enjoy it. Most of us did drink the buttermilk. And there'd be lots of time little specks of butter left in it. You know? It was good.
When you got electricity, how did it change the way your family lived?
Probably made it a bit easier for our parents. And probably able to read a little better at night. Yeah, I must have been about 13, I think, when I remember it faintly when they was digging the holes, putting the posts in. And about the same time, there began to be, instead of horse-drawn mail carriages, a fellow by the name of Guy Morehouse started a mail service on the neck here. And he'd get stuck in the mud and stuck in the snow drifts, and we'd go help shovel him out. And that's another thing we had to do. Was at those days there was lots and lots of snow, and you were obligated to go shovel snow. They'd order you out. We used to go anyhow, I guess, whether it was big enough or not, we'd go help. And the snow was deep enough that you'd have to shovel it up on here. Another fellow would stand on this, shovel it up on the next, over top, and you'd be right up to the telephone wires in places. Of course, the telephone poles at that time wouldn't probably be over 10 or 12 feet high. But yeah, sure, you would no. Sometimes shovel it up 3 times in drifts in places. Lots and lots of snow. Unbelievable. Yeah.
How did that make you feel to have to go and do that?
Oh, sometimes you didn't want to go, but other times it was good to get out in the crowd, and they'd come from Centerville. We used to have to shovel from Centerville down to probably where our school used to be or something. There'd be drifts, you know. Maybe you could walk for 300 or 400 yards and not any snow, and then you'd come into a drift and you'd have to start shoveling. Crowd of men. And there was no aluminum shovels in those days. It was all those heavy iron shovels. That alone was a load, one of them big shovels. Yeah.
How much of what you needed did you make yourself?
Well, I never made a whole lot of things, but my father was because I went away from that when I was old enough to work, but he made ox yokes when he needed his cattle, a new yoke for his cattle. But I remember driving our oxen over to Waterford, which was 3 to 4 miles, to have new shoes put on them. And then after Mr. Vidito quit it, we used to go to Centerville to Charlie Graham's. Drive your oxen up there and have new shoes put on them. They would have to put them in what they call stand. Can't even remember the name of the gear they used to put them in. Anyhow, you put them in, and they had a roller like a fair with a pad on it on the bottom, and you used to put them in there, and you had an iron bar to put in holes in that, and you'd pull it down, and then you'd put another bar in, and you'd put the ox right up more or less off of the ground, put a big strain on them so you could lift their feet and tie them, and that would hold them, and then you'd have their neck fastened in that, and yeah. You'd tie their foot on the pad like this, and put the shoes to them. Some would really raise the devil. They were bad. It was scary at times to see them raunching back and forth in the wasn't that funny? I can't remember the name of those things.
What would trips on the oxen be like?
It's very slow. Oxen didn't travel very fast most of the time. And some oxen you could set on the cart and they would go where you wanted to go, and others, when they were younger, of course, you had to stay in front of them and team them where you wanted to go. They would run away the odd time. Yeah, they'd get going. You wouldn't know what to do.
What sorts of things would you barter for?
Oh, I really don't think there was too much. Seemed that most everyone had homegrown things that, if one person was growing it, probably the other person did the same thing. There used to be a few people come around and sell clothes. A fellow by the name of Max Miller, I think he was from Yarmouth. And there was an old gentleman named Hanley Westgate. He used to have a little cart, the box would probably be 5 or 6 feet long on it, and probably 2.5 feet wide. And he'd have that full of spices and different things for the household, And it was painted red with wooden spokes on the wheels, an iron rim on it, just like an old wagon. And the cart had a tongue on it with a stick through the handle, to pull on. And we used to either, we would help him pull the cart, or most of the time push. He would hang on the handles behind himself, the 2 bars. And we would push him up the hill or something. He'd give us 2 or 3 peppermints. That's the way we got our pay.
Not good pay.
Yeah.
With such a big family, what was bath time like at your house?
Oh, gee. Everybody for himself, I guess. We had no running water. It's, you carried your water. Or no, we had an artesian well, but it didn't supply a whole lot of water. That was right when I was small, though. We used to had a bucket on a spool, and you'd put the bucket in, had a weight on the side of the bucket to make it sink, and you'd wind the bucket up, and you'd carry your water. That's something else that mothers had to do while the kids were small. And then they drilled an artesian well, which didn't prove very good. Didn't get a whole lot of water out of that, but I remember pumping that for water. And you done the best you could do with what you had. Outside toilets, and that's another thing that the Eaton catalog come in handy for in those days. I probably gabbed enough.
No, not at all. I'm just going to turn this, I think, just about at the end. good stories.
Oh, to start off my life, I put the cart ahead of the horse here. When I was about 2.5 years old, like I told you, I had a little accident. The old gentleman that they bought the farm from at home had a Queen Anne musket, and my father had hauled some fish waste in the field for fertilizer, and he said to my mother, he lived there with him, or with us, and he said, if I had a cap for this, he had Queen Anne musket, used to be a little cap that and they were had a hammer on the side. He said, I'd shoot a crow or a gull and hang it up, and they wouldn't bother the... So Mum was cleaning up his room one day, and she found this cap, and she said, is this what you'd like to have for your gun? This is what they tell me. And he said yes, and he took it and he put it on his stand. Well, in a few days' time, my mother was in there cleaning his room, and there was a stove in his room, a heater. I picked up the cap and put it on the stove and went back to get it in a few minutes' time, and it exploded. I lost my left index finger, distal phalanges, I guess the proper name of that, and blew this one all to pieces in my thumb, and lost the sight of my left eye. So Mum had no phone at that time. This would be back in 1922. And she had to carry me over to Henry Cossabone's, which was about pretty near half a mile away. And had 2 other little children at home besides. And called the doctor. He lived in Sandy Cove, and then he had to come with his horse and buggy, which was 4 miles up to our home, to look after me. And he was all alone, of course, no nurses. And he'd done the best he could for me, and that was the way I started my life.
Do you remember how that felt? When
No, I don't remember a thing about it. But they've told me, and I still have the scars, where he cut this finger back and was going to take some of the bone off because it's solid there. And I started to wake up, and he didn't dare to give me any more anesthetic, and so he just folded it up. And probably months of tender loving care, I get over it. There was a piece hit me in the face there that there's a scar still in there where the piece of the cap hit me. Could have been both eyes, could have been worse. And it did have an effect on my life, I guess. I always figured that, well, I've only got the sight of one eye and my hand is beat up, I'll never mount anything, so I'll go to work. That's what I done, I worked. And I couldn't get in the service when I was 20, or when I was in St. John. That was in 43, I think, that I got a call to go to the service, and they rejected me. So that's as far as I went. Yeah.
What sorts of emergencies would there be that the doctor would come? How bad would it have to be in order for the doctor to come?
Well, no doubt he would probably come for, or if you had a horse, maybe you'd go to his home, horse or whatnot. There was very few cars then. But he was very good. He delivered, I guess, most of the babies. And when I was born, I remember Mom always joked, said that the fact that it did happen, but she said on March the 7th of 1920, there was a big snowstorm. He came to deliver me. Mom said he upset me in the snowdrift out coming up to the house. Our house was quite a long ways off of the road. She always told me that, yeah, when I was little.
How would you take care of your teeth?
Oh boy, I guess you brushed with most of the time with soda, salt and soda or some darn thing you'd done. But my teeth weren't very good apparently. I lost mine when I was quite young. Had falsies for a long while. I remember at one time, this was after the bus started, the mail bus. Mother had a sister who lived in Digby. Her name was Nora Raymond. They used to call her Tood. So, probably had a telephone by then too, when I was probably 12 or 13 years old. She sent me up on the bus to Aunt Nora's to go to Dr. DeVernet, I think his name was, an old fellow that used to be a dentist. So my Aunt Nora took me to the dentist, and I sat in the chair, and I done all right until I seen him pick up a syringe with a long, looked to be a needle about that long. I got up and I took right out. I said, I guess I wouldn't have him hauled today. And I went then. I never had another toothache for about 6 months, I guess. It scared me so bad. But I had to go back eventually and have them out, have 2 or 3 out at that time. Yeah. Yeah, I remember that.
How often would you see the dentist?
Oh boy, only when you had to. Probably 2 or 3 years maybe. Yes, only when you got a toothache. I never had a tooth filled, I don't think, when I was a young fella. Probably, I don't remember the first ones, but probably been 16, 18 years old before I had a tooth filled. In fact, when you were small and you needed a tooth out, if it wasn't too serious, Father used to haul them out with a piece of string, you know. They'd tie a piece of twine or a good strong thread around your tooth. Take a couple of turns around your finger or something, give it a yank, and out that would come. And then there was a fellow in Centerville. He pulled tooth for Mabel one time. I don't think he ever pulled any for me. But he never froze them. He had old forceps and stuff. He never had, to freeze. He never could freeze teeth. But he'd haul teeth for people. In fact, there was an old fellow that he got his forceps from. I'll tell you a little story. It don't pertain to me, of course. His name was Fletch Thompson. And this is who that Willie Titus got his forceps from. And there was a fellow come into Centerville on a sailing boat. And he had the toothache. So someone told him, there's an old fellow up the top of the hill will pull that tooth for you. So he walked up the road. It was up on top of the hill, called Angry Hill. He was out splitting wood, and it was shore wood that they'd picked up off the shore, and wharf wood, you know, had long, big spikes, iron spikes, probably this long in it. Some of them were bent, and the odd one would be straight. And he said, went up to him, he said, are you the man that pulls the teeth here? Yes. He said, sit down on that log. So this fellow sat down, and at the same time Fletch picked up an iron bolt, some wharf bolts, and he had a pole axe in his hand. He said, sit down on that log. That fellow seen him coming. I don't know whether he stopped yet or not. Stories they used to tell. That actually happened, I guess.
What were some home remedies that would have been common?
Oh, you got neuralgia? Used to have neuralgia in your face sometimes, or a toothache. A bag of salt table salt and heat it. And different, is it cinnamon or clove? Cinnamon, I guess. You'd put on a piece of batten, and if you had an ulcer or a tooth that had a cavity in it, put that in, and it seemed to stop it. And one time, I started to walk to Centerville, and one of the children was sick. Someone younger than myself. Mom came out, and I was then quite a little ways away, and she said, "You go to the store. When you go to the store, you get me a bottle of syrup of squills." That was an old remedy they used then for cough medicine or something, or to put on people. And I couldn't understand what she was saying, not quite. So all I could hear was "Circus on the Hills." So I went up to the store, Elwyn Morton then, Morton's store, and I asked for a bottle of Circus on the Hills. Well, he didn't know what I wanted. Yeah, after a while, he came twig to it, and he got me this bottle of syrup of squills. Yeah, it was very sour, I think, if I remember right. It must have been something that was for a cough or some darn thing, yeah. Syrup of squills. Circus on the Hills. I was close. Oh, dear.
When someone died, how would the funeral be handled?
Well, there was a horse in a buggy for a hearse. And, of course, local people would dig the grave by hand then. You would sometimes have a lot of hard digging. And, of course, I don't remember the first vehicle for a hearse, really. But Mr. Kenny Dakin used to have the horse and buggy in Centerville, and they would deliver them to the cemetery. Most of the time, at that time, the corpses would probably remain in the homes for a couple of days before they were transported to the cemetery. Yeah. Funny, I don't remember the first vehicle I ever saw that was a hearse. And Mr. Con Gidney up here in Mink Cove used to do the same thing with a horse and buggy, I guess. And oh dear. I don't know what else to tell you.
What do you remember about the Depression?
Oh, that was when, in the early 30s. And like I say, times were really tough. I was, at that time, from 30 to 35, 36. You worked for, if you could get a job, you worked out when you could for 20, 25 cents an hour. And you were lucky if you got 5 or 10 cents for a week for an allowance, because your parents or your father couldn't earn very much money. But he worked hard. He scalloped, he lobster fished in St. Mary's. They used to walk over from home through the woods until the lake froze over, and then they'd go across the lake and go down the mountain, and they had a camp over there. Like lobster season started 1st of December. They'd stay there for 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a couple of weeks. They'd take groceries with them, bread, and they'd make lobster chowders, of course. And and a few things they could get to eat. And they had to row dory at that time to fish, so they were probably too tired to walk home. I know they would be. And they had to keep their lobsters in crates, and there would be a boat come up from down to Tiverton, up in the St. Mary's Bay, and pick up their lobsters. And their season then would probably be only about 3 weeks, and it would be over because of the ice. And after he got done lobster fishing, and he started scallop fishing. And he owned some of the first trucks. I don't know whether you ever heard of H.T. Warren building trucks in Digby, old Defiance trucks. My father owned 2 of them, and that is where I learned to drive. He had a yellow one. The first one he bought was yellow. And he was always busy then hauling waste home from shore and rockweed, and he would be on the back spreading it, and I would get in the truck and drive it ahead for him. And there was no automatic transmissions then, and you had to, everything was with a clutch, you know, and you had to learn how to do that and not stall your truck. And or if you started up too quick, you'd probably knock him down the back of the truck, so you had to go easy. Yeah, he built trucks there for a few years, and then they all had a dump on it at that time, that did, but it wasn't hydraulic. It was on rollers, and there was like a curved thing in the bottom. You'd unhook it and start out quick, and that would shove your body back, and then it would roll up. That was the way it dumped. And after some time, he bought a second one and put another fellow driving it, and they were down to, built the Mersey Dam, helped build the Mersey Dam. And he had more breakdowns, and he kind of lost what he had earned with one truck. What he was doing with the yellow truck, he'd lose on the red truck, because that was broken down all the time, and he had to get out of it. Get rid of the old Defiance trucks. Yeah.
How did you plan for hard times or retirement?
Well, I never earned any big amount of money at a time, but I tried to save a few dollars every year over my lifespan, and I've been fortunate enough that I live quite comfortable now. I don't want for very much. I haven't got a lot of money, but I have Canada pension, old age pension, and a couple of other little pensions. So I'm not, I'm not hurting. I never wasted my money. I never drank very much, thank God, and I never smoked a whole lot, so that helped. But put both my children through college, and Pam teaches school now. We lost Marty 5 years ago at 41, I think he was when he died. Pam teaches school in Fort Williams, and her husband teaches. They have 2 children, a boy and a girl. He's very sport-minded. He likes to play golf, run, and curling. He was over to the Netherlands last spring in that deal, running. And 2 years ago, he was down to Pennsylvania in the Hershey deal, and he was to throw a ball in, a softball, and he went to Sackville and tried out, and he came way ahead of any competition there. But he went down there and something happened. He didn't do too good. I don't know why, but he tried out again for it to go this year, And he threw the ball down here real good. And just a few days before he was to go down to Hershey again, he hurt his shoulder throwing. No, he was playing volleyball and hurt his shoulder. So he couldn't go down there that time. So he got beat out of that. But he's got lots of ribbons and trophies, a few firsts, but mostly seconds and thirds. He does good. Yeah, he's good at golf, down in his 70s.
Wow.
Yeah, he's only 14. Catherine, she's taking skating lessons and plays piano. Likes soccer, so they're busy.
How did your parents pass on their possessions?
Actually, they never had a whole lot to pass on. They sold their... My father was sick for... We came home from St. John. He was diabetic before we came home. And he came home from St. John and got sick and had a couple strokes. He was diabetic, was taking 30 units of insulin a day, and the doctor took a lot of food from him that he shouldn't have, I don't think, and he wound up having a couple of strokes. And he had to have a toe removed, and then it was his leg, and he died from complications of his last surgery. He never came out of it. And they had sold their farm and moved up to Centerville. And Mom, of course, just had, at that time, I guess the old age pension was only $30, $40 a month. But Mom did live till she was 83. Father passed on when he was, I think, 69. But there wasn't very much of the farm left. In fact, they only got like $3,000 or $4,000 for it when they sold it. Land was cheap those days when they sold that.
What do you remember about the poor farm?
I remember being there a few times with my father, seeing some of the inmates, and it was scary, I thought. I know I wouldn't want to be there myself. I think an old Mr. Thomas was the caretaker then, when I remember it. Avis, you're going to leave us, are you?
I got to go home. Things to do.
Sure.
Excuse me, dear.
Certainly.
Nice to meet you.
What did you find scary about the poor farm?
Well, seeing people locked up in different areas, and see Avis. They were locked up, some of them, and it was like wooden slats. And probably the scariest thing I ever seen was in Bridgetown, to an old, well, actually it was, I think, a poor farm. And there was a man, they couldn't keep any clothes on him. And he was, you could go there, my brother and I, we peddled fish. That's another part of my life I never told you about, I guess. Peddled fish for a few years. And we'd go there on, Bridgetown, Tuesday morning. And you'd see him in there behind the bars and in the straw without a thing on. He wouldn't keep no clothes on. And there was another old fellow who used to be out around the yard. And every week he would say the same thing. He'd say, "Where's Mr. Weber?" And of course, we didn't know old Mr. Weber. And Bud would say, "Well, he's dead. He died last week." And he'd start right in a cry. And Bud would do that to him every week. He'd say the same thing every time we'd go there. "Where's Mr. Weber?" He was a black man. Yeah. And those things stay in your mind, don't they? Yeah, they're not a pleasant part of life, but yeah.
At what point would somebody have to go to the courtroom?
Well, probably when they were unable to look after themselves and no income, and perhaps a lot of them were a bit mentally retarded, or if that's the proper word, or afflicted in some way. And they did some farming there. They had, I think they grew vegetables and had cattle there. And so they worked their way there some to help maintain that. And but it actually was a poorhouse, I guess, because the poor probably did go there. And yeah.
What do you remember about elections?
Seeing 3 or 4 people intoxicated, probably. This always seemed to happen back when I was a younger fellow. The different parties had, and a lot of people, some of them, they wouldn't go vote unless they could get a pint or something. Some women wouldn't go without a box of chocolates. So a lot of the fellers that wanted a pint, they'd get intoxicated or partly intoxicated and probably get in an argument over who was going to win, who should win. I was never much enthused over politics. I always voted, but that's as far as it went. I didn't want no part of it because it's a mixed up game, and I think still today that most of them are there for what money they can make and not for the good of the people. It's sometimes you wonder how some people hold those positions because they don't appear to have the mentality to do it. That's my opinion of politics. And every year seems to be getting worse. It's why they're elected, if they have nobody else, probably no one better to offer, but why they're elected, I don't know. But today it's locally anyhow, it's mostly lawyers and doctors, and probably only there because they can't make a living at their own profession. They get into politics. This is on tape. I shouldn't be saying that, but
You haven't named any names. So.
no. But that's not everyone, but a lot of people are that way, and I know they're not there for the good of the people. Of course, they can only do what their superiors allow them to do. But it just seems that we pay enough taxes that things should be better, especially in the health and education. There's been too many cuts, or either that, or they was giving us too much and didn't realize where they were putting the country. The country's in debt, both levels of government, so far that I know I'll never see over it, and you're a young woman, and I doubt if you ever will, because the interest on that, our debt, is eating us up.
Mm-hmm.
What different ghost stories do you remember as a young child?
What different stories?
Ghost stories.
Oh. Huh. Not too many, I guess. One night of myself, my brother and I built a horse stall. I think it was a horse stall. One Sunday. And Mom tried to tell us not to work on Sunday. She said, we said, don't you fellas be working on Sunday. anyhow, we'd done this. We sawed and hammered all day. In the wee hours of the morning, we heard something pounding on the steps, stair steps. We stepped upstairs. And Mum always said that it wasn't her that done it. My father was away. She said it wasn't her. Now, whether it was the real ghost after us or not, I don't know. But if it wasn't her, I don't know who it was. Yeah, I remember. I can hear that sound. Yeah, really banging on the steps. Probably was, but she wouldn't tell us.
What about superstitions?
I really don't think that I have very many superstitions. Mabel does. One crow scares her to pieces. Yeah.
On the boats at all, were there superstitions?
Oh, yeah, you hear of them. Never to whistle because, make the wind blow. And throw a penny or a dime overboard to buy that much wind and you could get in a lot of trouble. Never do that. Few little things like that. And never speak of a pig or pork aboard of a boat. You're supposed to stay away from that.
How did your community police itself?
First I remember of police was the RCMP, because there was no, it was too small a community, and that's the only police. There was no other police on Digby Neck except the RCMP. And our first cars that we had around home was an old Model T. And that had three pedals. The clutch, the reverse was in the middle, and the brake. So going out of our driveway was a little bit steep. And my brother Bud and I, we had that old Model T running around the field with it, and we went down the driveway and got to the mouth of the driveway, and the reverse band was loose on it, and it wouldn't back up. And so we said we'll have to go out in the road and turn around. No, it was in the road. We went with the old Model T. It wasn't registered, and we was underage. No license, of course. And lo and behold, of all the times, an RCMP came along. And his name was Mr. Rankin. A tall fellow, slim. I can't forget. Oh boy. He took us to the house. And told my mom, said, I'll never let him have it again. I can hear her pretty near crying yet. Because money was scarce, of course. And he didn't find us. He let us take the car back up in the yard, but stay off the road. Isn't that strange how how that would be? He would come along there. And we were only going out in the road to turn the thing around because our reverse band wouldn't work.
Probably hadn't been down for 2 weeks.
That's right.
Yeah.
In just an opportune moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How was the law enforced in your community?
How was it? Oh, boy. Well, the only enforcement was then, like I say, the RCMP. And I don't know, no one seemed to break the law too much. If they did, you didn't know of it. I guess there was people made home brew. That was no doubt illegal, especially around the shore in Centerville. The boys would make it. And there's an old Mr. Filio from Weymouth, a fishery officer. He used to make a trip around once in a while. The odd fellow used to keep small lobsters. And they tasted good. I've eaten a few of them. I never caught too many lobsters, but used to get a few. But as far as law enforcement, really, I used to go hunting and mostly rabbit shooting. Used to try to shoot deer, but I never had a real good gun to do it with, or not been able to do it until I went up Cape Breton. I had a rifle with a scope on it, and I shot some deer up there. I was up there 6 years. Got a deer every year. But I never enjoyed shooting deer. Never enjoyed eating them, so I never enjoyed shooting them. It was just to go along with the other fellers to make a hunting party, and we used to go up to Bedeck and go up on Hunter's Mountain. Yeah.
What organizations did you belong to?
Oh, I never belonged to any till I went to New Brunswick, and I joined the Knights of Pythias Lodge. When I came home from there, I took a demit from that, and after some years joined the Masonic Order in Freeport. Clyde and I went down there and joined that. Still belong to Masons. And that's the only 2 lodges I ever belonged to.
Tell me about the Masons.
They're an order that does a lot of good. Some people are frightened of them, but I see no reason. They read the Bible and believe there's a supreme being, which we all know there is, and if they've got any money, they pass it out to different students. I know different times they've given out money to different students to help with. So I can say nothing bad about them. I don't go very often, but I'm still belong to the Masonic Order. Some people, I guess, become engrossed in it, and they go to the top in it. Of course, there has to be a top in everything, and probably they may give the order a hard name because maybe it takes away from them going to their own church or something. They think more of the Masonic Order than they do their church, but no, I can't say nothing wrong about it.
What do you remember about tourists coming to the area?
Sandy Cove was, when I was a young fellow, there used to be a lot of tourists come there, and the father used to, like I said, butcher a few lambs, and he'd take them down there and sell them to the different homes where they was boarded and stayed. And next door, over to Henry Costabum's, there was a tourist. I don't remember their name. It was a woman, quite sure. She was there. I used to work over there to help him hay in the summertime. I was only 13 or 14 years old. She gave me a jackknife, and it wasn't too long and I'd lost it. And I always felt bad over losing my jackknife, of course. Yeah. But personally, I never knew any of the tourists, and they, at that time when they came there, most of them were on foot, they would probably come down the neck on the bus. Yeah. Not too many cars, but I remember old Reggie Cipher. He had a stiff leg and one arm. He drove an old Buick. He used to drive people back and forth to Digby, smoke cigars. And this is one of our bad things we used to do when we was going to school. He'd throw out a cigar butt on the road. 2 or 3 of us would go pick it up. tear it up. Had an old pipe made out of a pill bottle or some darn thing. Try to smoke that cigar. Make you sick.
Yes.
Uh,
Who were some of the colorful characters in your community?
yeah, there was a few. Dr. Rice had a son, Bertram his name was. He was afflicted from some reason, I don't know. He could not speak, and he was not a bit steady. He would moved all around, but they had him fixed up nice. He had gold teeth, and he used to enjoy cranking cars. A lot of cars at that time had no electric starter on them. You cranked them by hand, and he would always want you to let him crank the car. He was some happy when the car would start, and he'd laugh. Oh, it was great for him. He got a little bit older, and there was some young fellas around Sandy Cove used to tease him. When his hair started turning gray, turning white, they'd point at his head and they'd told him, say, "You're soon going up the grave," or they'd point up the grave. Oh, that made him mad, yeah. But I never done that to him, thank heavens. Yeah. And there was a fella up around Centerville. Oh, Stewart, he's still living, Stewart O. Singer. He was a character. I think he lives around Digby. I'm sure he does, yeah. And a fellow by the name of, his name was, he's living too, was, Joe Honey, they called him. What was his name? Real name? Not Gerald. Ronald Titus. He used to smoke a pipe, and he'd smoke a rosebud. He used to pack that thing and smoke it. And he used to come to our home quite a lot, and I had a cousin who used to come home. Man, we used to be somebody at home most of the time with our big family, and everybody had friends. And Joe used to come down home, and this Margaret, she used to tease him. She'd sit on his knee, and he got so he liked her. And he'd bring candy and put in his pocket, and she'd make out she was going to get this candy out of his pocket. And he'd snicker and laugh. I can see him yet. They had an accident up just this side of Centerville. Somebody, I guess they was drinking, had an old Buick car going too fast. They upset it and rolled it down in the woods, and it smashed it all to pieces. And they said to Joe, he kind of stuttered a little bit. They would said to Joe, "Did they get hurt?" "Oh, she said broke both arms and leg, scratched up some, both all."
Not to worry then.
No. Oh dear. Different things like that would be your little laughs, I guess. You'd hear them. So.
What do you remember about Maud Lewis?
Oh, not a whole lot. We went there once or twice, was going to buy a painting, and I guess she didn't have any, so we never got one. At that time, you bought them for a quarter or 50 cents, something. But she was a very small, wizzled-up old lady, when I remember. Yeah. I think that was before she and Everett, well, they might have been married then, but I think Everett was living there with her, Everett Lewis.
How
Yeah.
does this area look now compared to what it looked like back then?
It hasn't changed a whole lot, except for a lot of the trees were gone, and that became a necessity. Actually, a lot of the trees should have been harvested probably 15 or 20 years ago. They became mature and spruce bark beetle got in them and they all started dying. And if we had the money's worth of trees that's gone to waste on Digby Neck the last 20 years, I think we could probably write off a lot of Nova Scotia's debts. It's a shame the way it's happened. People, local, and a lot of American people have bought properties, and they just buy them, and it laid there and laid there. And eventually the trees started dying because they become 60, 70, 80 years old, and that is the life. Probably 60 years, spruce trees should be cut, and they should be harvested. But I'm not in favor of clear cutting in a good green property. But when it becomes so it's all dying, then they have to do that to get it down. All this up here was clear cut, and about 300 acres or more, and used to be all green years ago, and you could walk through it. And then the first thing you started going through it, and you'd run into areas where you'd have to detour for about 5 or 10 minutes to get around a bunch of windfalls, dead wood. And it should have been cut before that started, picking out the old wood and letting the young die. But when it happened, then they cut everything. It's not a pretty sight, but it's a part of life. A tree is like we are. Some lives to be 50, 60 years old. Some goes to 80, 90. But
how would you compare family values today as in days gone by?
well, I don't think they have changed all that much for people who care. So there are people that probably back in my youth that didn't care too much about their family. They neglected them and done things they shouldn't do. And that's still going on today, the same. But I can't see, probably maybe a little less. I think the divorce rate and people parting is higher today than it was then, but things are made easier for people to run away now. And it only takes probably a few words between people now, and they say, oh, I ate with you, I'm off, I'm gone. But back then probably it wasn't so easy to do that. So they stuck it out. Yeah. I don't know.
Very astute observation, I think.
Pardon?
Many astute observations this afternoon. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful conversation. Yeah.
Well, I hope I haven't been too boring for you.
Not at all.
Very
Lots of
interesting.
times this is difficult because you want to laugh out loud, but yet we don't want our voices on the tape.
No.
No, that was, I learned a lot.
I did too.
Well, I hope so, girls.
Yeah.
Glad to be able to help. And
We'll let you know how this...
well, thank you very
Yeah.
much.
I think the plan is, it's going to be made into a website and all this, but there's going to be a kind of an